Chapter 1 The 56, a system of planets divided into the Eastern 18, Central 18, and Western 20. Each planet holds 2 votes in the Interplanetary Congress. On the planet Bagwell, in Bagwell City, home of 130 million people, 70 floors under Military Central Command, or the Spire, in one small room, 12 individuals determine life and death on a planet 3 weeks distant. 8 technicians wearing dark gray uniforms stood facing the wall. Bright orbs of light circled their heads, providing constant streams of data. Behind the technicians, there stood 3 junior officers and the general in command. The voice of Captain Lisa Gerard crackled over comm. "Jumper 2 here. Destination reached." "Captain, there are timing discrepancies in Thruster 3. Cross-check," Major Bjork, one of the junior officers in the room, ordered. Lisa mumbled briefly about their idiotic pilot before responding. "Cross-check confirms discrepancies. Thruster 3 needs to be disabled. We didn't lock into the E-prop properly. I'd like to file a formal complaint for incompetence against our pilot, Master Chief Jason." "Now isn't the time, Captain. Mark enemy weapon positions." General Biman's voice cut her off. "Yes, sir. We detect 3 wave battery clusters. Strength unknown. 28 impact waves surround the Midget Man compound." Lisa's disembodied voice again addressed the officers. "Impact waves are irrelevant. You can take them out later before executing ground operations. You're there for the ship, and, if possible, the captain. Utilize your range on the wave batteries and force that ship close." General Biman brought a holographic map to life and deftly manipulated the controls with his hands. "Initiating approach," Lisa informed them. Second Lieutenant Drent Hawkins, one of the junior officers, looked towards the general. "Did you get final approval for this, Andrew?" Major Winston, who was monitoring Captain Gerard's vitals, flinched, and his hand ran over the shiny surface of his head. Her vitals had just jumped. Andrew silenced his command and chopped at his throat, signaling the other officers to also silence theirs. He addressed the technicians. "Cut comm for Lieutenant Hawkins." He turned on Hawkins. "You're strictly an observing officer, Lieutenant, and you just put uncertainty in the captain's mind." "I'm sorry, sir. I won't speak again." "You're right," Andrew said. Though he was by far the youngest in the room, Andrew's word was final. Drent's comm switched to passive. Lisa interrupted, oblivious to the showdown taking place so far away. "Enemy ship is a smooth surface trideck, larger than the report." The health monitor betrayed her elevated heart rate, though there was no fluctuation in her voice. Andrew tried and failed to connect with Lisa's view transmitter. "Captain, turn on your VT." He waited a moment and tried again. A technician broke into Andrew's communication. "General, there's a Colonel Jentlon outside the door demanding to speak with you." "They're getting hit hard, sir," Major Bjork said. "Damage across the hull. Bridge seems secure." "Tell Colonel Jentlon I'm busy," Andrew said. "Sir, we're not remotely close enough." Lisa's voice was strained. "This is impossible. They should be way out of range this close to orbit," Bjork murmured. "Don't speak if your comments aren't helpful," Andrew snapped. "How much time?" His hands clenched, having a rough idea already. "Nude will hold 70 seconds max before multiple penetrations in their hull renders the frame unsafe," Bjork responded. "What supplies does Captain Gerard have on board?" "Food, water, and a small personal weapons cache," Major Winston answered from the general's opposite side. "Captain, propel the water tank in front of your vessel with a shaped charge," Andrew said. The technician again broke into the general's communication. "I'm sorry to interrupt again, General, but Colonel Jentlon is outside the room screaming and shouting that you're ruining his operation." "Get rid of the colonel. Forcibly if necessary." Andrew listened as heavy breathing came over comm. He watched Lisa move the strange weapon into place over her view transmitter. A short boom cracked over comm, and the giant tank appeared in Lisa's VT, floating towards the enemy vessel. A flash winked when Lisa detonated the charge, creating a sheet of water moving toward the Midget Man vessel. Bjork exhaled heavily. "Wave impacts are practically gone. The nude's recovering." "That water is dispersing too quickly," Andrew thought. "Captain, did you use a shape charge?" "No, sir. A spherical charge," Lisa answered. "The water is dispersing too quickly. Captain, in 20 seconds use your chemical brakes for propulsion through the water. Hit their bridge with everything, including impact waves." "Yes, sir." A small cough followed her acknowledgement. Andrew frowned. She didn't think it would work. Drent leaned close to the general and spoke for the first time since his comm was disabled. Impact waves? There is no way those can help at this range. Andrew stayed in comm and answered, Waves are harmonic, Lieutenant. If it piggybacks the long wave and provides even a tiny boost, I'll take it, and so will Captain Gerard. Bjork and Winston exchanged glances. That answer wasn't meant for Drent. Winston nodded towards the general as Lisa's vitals steadied. Andrew remained focused, waiting for the moment. He wanted to figure out how the midget men had increased their range to such a distance, especially with atmospheric distortion, but he put it aside and centered his thoughts on anything further they could use to their advantage.
We're burning, Lisa said, knowing full well everyone was already watching through her view transmitter. Seconds later, her ship burst through the curtain of water.
All firing, Bjork said. Andrew hoped the enemy didn't have increased nude armor like their increased range. If only Lisa had used the shape charge, they could have moved behind the water. A collective sigh went through the room as a small fire on the bridge of the midget man vessel flared. The fire disappeared briefly, before returning brighter than before as the whole bridge slid from the frame of the ship towards the planet's surface.
We'll begin retrieval operations on D. Hay in 12 hours, sir, Lisa said.
Winston will be in charge. Good work, Captain. Andrew tapped out and headed for the exit before tapping back in. Don't forget to grab some water, or it'll be a long ride home. He exited the room, his secured channel closing on exit. Drent caught up a little down the hall. Don't forget water? You're a nutcase, Andrew. Who remembers water after something like that? Andrew slapped Drent's back and flashed a grin. One day, when you're as brilliant as me, you'll be able to answer that. Oh, how I wish you were joking. But no, you're completely delusional in this regard. Andrew shrugged. What you did in there, Drent. Look, I know. I was out of line. I'm sorry. Nothing would be gained by pushing further, so Andrew smiled. How's Liberty? I hate when you ask about her. Every time you say her name, I detect massive quantities of sarcasm. Only one thing people love more than life is liberty. In your case, it's literal. They turned left at the hall and stepped onto the lift which took them up 70 floors in as many seconds. Together they stepped out of the building to an empty avenue. What's going on? Where is everyone? Andrew asked. Well, let's see. The king died, and the transfer is tonight. How can you not know? I've been huddled in the spire for 2 days planning this attack, Drent. That's how. Let's go to the business sector. There should be a restaurant or two still open. Andrew stepped onto the city belt system, which greatly increased their walk speed. The buildings on either side grew taller and better looking the further they moved from the government sector. There hasn't been a queen in 200 years. It's either her or the princess. Both need a mate. Drent nudged his friend with a wink. She's smart and motivated, plus very beautiful. The queen? I know you know, Andrew, if only because I've informed you of these facts multiple times. And she's a bleeding heart humanitarian. Quite the package. Andrew disregarded the heavy hint and carried on his theme. It's ridiculous that at this juncture of our civilization, the monarchy is still hereditary. It should be the king's appointment unless overruled by a 75% vote. And you need to get your head out of the gossip channels. Perhaps that's why I am the way I am. I don't clutter my mind with useless garbage. Drent plowed ahead with single-minded purpose, ignoring Andrew's personal attack and attempt to change the conversation. The most eligible bachelor in the Eastern 18, and the noblest young woman in all the 56 planets. It's a perfect match. You want burrito bends? I swear you're a complete moronic ribber sometimes. It amazes and disturbs me how these warped fantasies take over your usually rational mind. In some distorted way I don't understand, it somehow feeds your matchmaking mania. And Burrito Ben's closed last week. Ben died, killed in a robbery. That's too bad about Ben. Nice guy. Just go to the ceremony tonight. Give it 20 minutes max. The gossip channels will be on fire. The first ever meeting of the two most famous singles in the universe. Or we could do a clandestine meeting and make lots of money selling the story. Think of all the retired vets you could care for with the money.
Certainly you weren't so selfish as to refuse them food and clothing. I'm not a bad dancer either, so long as I stick to the classical. You're an excellent dancer. You always put me to shame. Don't be a suck-up, Drent. I'm for home. Have a good night. Andrew waved and stepped from the fastest track of the belt down 2 speeds before hopping off. 3 seconds later his comm tapped. What? Food? Drent queried. I'll eat at home. Goodbye, Drent. Andrew tapped out and stepped back onto the belt, heading in the opposite direction, this one towards his home. Once through his door, he checked his invitation and discovered the coronation celebration was in 30 minutes. Donning his formal military uniform, adorned with 16 operation ribbons, he regarded himself in the mirror. He smiled and buffed out a small scuff on his left shoe before again stepping into the city. The roof of the city dome was beginning to dim in the resemblance of a natural sunset. Always in the path of light from 3 bright suns, Bagwell City needed man to control the schedule. Within 5 minutes, Andrew was standing outside the castle. Technically, it was only a high-security government building, with a slightly more decorative design than most, but nothing could hide its bureaucratic stench. But, for whatever reason, people still called it a castle. Striding the wide black steps to the entrance, he was stopped by a guard in full military dress. His insignia showed he was retired. Name? General Biman. A wave of the hand sent him through a scanner. Good evening, sir. A salute followed as the scanner confirmed his identity. You too. Etiquette dictated that an officer could only salute a retired officer of equal or higher rank. The Royal Security Detail was comprised of retired NCOs, so Andrew warmly shook the man's hand. Inside, 5,000 tightly packed guests extended across the long room in a rainbow of colors, beneath flickering lights of fake candles that gave the gathering an air of gentility. As Andrew's name and rank were announced, heads turned in his direction, but the attention passed as private conversations again took priority. Andrew stepped to one side, unsure of his next move. He hadn't been to a formal event in 19 years. When he was 7, his father had led him around. The situation was slightly different now. General, a short, fat man wheezed as he hurried to Andrew's side, tugging his wife's hand, and she, her daughter's. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Gerard Butter. The man's limp hand was thrust in front of Andrew. This is my wife, Orpha, and my daughter, Jasmine. Andrew shook each hand in turn. The man continued enthusiastically. It is an honor to meet you again. You probably don't remember, but we met many years ago with your father. I was personal assistant to the king. Was? Andrew's eyes roamed the room. Oh, the king passed away last night, Gerard said, shocked that Andrew wasn't aware of the fact. Yes, of course. I was sorry to learn of it. Andrew lowered his head in respect. General! A husky voice boomed over the crowd. Andrew smiled warmly at the sight of a friendly face. Admiral! Admiral Radcliff joined the party, making it 5. At 6 foot 4 inches tall, he towered over the portly Gerard and surpassed Andrew by 2 inches. Andrew saluted, and was saluted in return. As the last remaining admiral in the 56, he commanded respect in both military and political realms. What an unexpected surprise, General. So, you have decided to emerge from the spire. That's good. You must have noticed that I personally signed the invitation. May I steal him from you? The Admiral asked Gerard with a smile and a pat on the back that allowed for no contest. Hopefully we'll see each other again. Gerard thrust his lifeless hand into Andrew's firm grasp. Any friend of my father's is a friend of mine. Admiral Radcliff walked Andrew through the crowd, which parted before the 2 large men. I was told of your operation while coming here. That was some excellent work. I never knew water refracted waves. It wasn't the water. It was the small amount of lemon in the water. Grief, kid. What a mind. The Admiral patted Andrew's shoulder, and then propelled him across the room with one hand on his back. As they reached their destination near the royal entrance, the doors opened, and a hush came over the crowd. The Admiral leaned close to Andrew's ear. Perfect timing. The newly crowned queen entered the room to applause. A few young men in the crowd whistled shrilly before being quickly silenced by those nearby. At her entrance, unseen musicians played the royal anthem.
The Admiral waited till it was over before pushing Andrew forward.
In you go.
He flagged down the Queen.
Your Majesty, you may have heard of General Andrew Biman, son of the late General Arthur Biman, who served the king faithfully for many years.
Ah, General. A pleasure. A real pleasure. The Queen extended a hand. It's been whispered you're going to sweep my daughter off her feet. She smiled good-naturedly and drew Andrew into a light hug, much to his discomfort and the surprise of those nearby. The embrace was only broken when Admiral Radcliff clapped an arm over Andrew's shoulder and whispered, "The Queen is a covert gossip addict." Andrew raised an eyebrow, but didn't respond. "My dear Jefferson, how unchivalrous, slandering my reputation to General Andrew. We both know I leave the gossip to my daughter, who then secretly appraises me." She subtly waved her hand towards the princess, who disengaged herself from a conversation to join them. "It gives me great pleasure to introduce my daughter, Aurelia." The Queen placed her daughter's hand into Andrew's, forcing him to awkwardly salute the hand. The hint of a mischievous smile played on the Queen's lips, but disappeared in an instant. "As I don't intend to dance, and the others are impatient to begin, why don't you two lead out?" What have I gotten myself into? Andrew thought. He bowed. He wouldn't lie to himself. He was a terrible dancer. He'd come to shock Drent, but now he must play the part. He led Aurelia to the center of the floor, glancing back to see the Queen accept a handkerchief from the Admiral. Just get through this and get away. Smooth and easy. Smooth and easy. The music changed, and the floor filled with dancers. It was a little awkward at first because, while everyone else was cramped, Andrew and the princess were given 6 feet of clearance on all sides. He actually wished they could be bumped and hassled like the rest. That'd provide an excuse at least. Every step required his utmost concentration. It was so long since his training. 30 seconds in, Andrew missed a step. The princess took 2, and their movements effortlessly continued. "Did you compensate?" Andrew asked in an undertone, without looking her in the eye. He was focused on his feet. Aurelia smiled. Andrew got a tapping calm request and silently accepted. "I knew you'd call, you little gossip addict." "Surprised?" "Why? What's going on?" Drent asked. "I take it back. Connect to my VT." "You're wearing a view transmitter off task? Are we allowed to do that?" "I always wear one." Drent responded promptly. "Nice try. But you're looking at an old clip of her. She wears her hair up now." "Really? Let's find out." Andrew leaned close. "Do you normally wear your hair up?" She pulled back to give a quizzical glance. "Generally in public? Someone told me I look older with it up." "I'm in love with 2 women." Drent sighed. Andrew bit his tongue to control the threatening smile, and tapped out of calm before Drent could say more. When the dance ended, Aurelia placed a hand on his arm, and followed as he wove his way through the throng toward the Queen. "What was funny?" she asked. "Oh, nothing. A friend of mine was commenting on your beauty. It caught me off guard." "That's certainly a unique line. Is this where I pretend one of my friends mentioned how well you fill out your tux? Oh, and without speaking, no less." A smile played on her lips. Drent tried to communicate again, but Andrew ignored the tapping and tried to understand the princess's sarcasm. "I don't need to speak. My communicator catches the vibratory pattern of my throat, which, combined with the predictive brain scans, it makes for silent communication." Winston tapped, this time with a persistent squawk, indicating an emergency. "What is it?" Andrew asked hurriedly, though silently, pausing mid-step. The princess didn't ask why he'd stopped, but observed his throat moving. She perceived it wasn't a joke on his part, and waited for him to finish, covering their pause with a smile at those nearby. Winston's voice was agitated and hurried. "Captain Gerard is in trouble. The vessel we took out wasn't the only one." "Understood. I'm on my way." Andrew faced Aurelia and saluted her hand. "I apologize, but I must leave." Without awaiting an answer, he saluted the Admiral, who was watching them curiously, and plowed towards the exit. Once in the streets, he ran along the belt toward the spire while stripping off his outer jacket. As Andrew entered the vestibule, he was hailed by Colonel Nathan Jentlon,
who pushed himself from a seat across the room and ran on an intercept course. "You disgust me, Andrew. I've been running this operation for 2 months, and you blow my man's cover in minutes. Then you go and dance like the universe is for your entertainment?" Andrew tried to shift around Nathan, but a hand stopped him. "Remove your hand, Colonel," Andrew ordered. Nathan's head cocked to one side. "Don't you care?" He grabbed 2 fistfuls of Andrew's uniform. "My man was in their organization. He had a meeting with the captain today. The same captain who's been a faceless name for years." Nathan stopped shouting and stepped closer as guards approached. "This was my moment. Not all of us can ride the coattails of our fathers. Some of us have to earn our rank." "I'm needed elsewhere, Colonel." Andrew pushed him aside and ran to the lift without a backward glance. He normally would have disputed Colonel Jentlon's accusations, but an altercation would require an explanation to security, and that meant time. Humiliating the colonel wasn't worth risking the captain's life. The 17-second wait on the lift seemed an eternity until he reached the command post and tapped in. "What's going on?" "Captain Gerard and her men are on the surface. 3 have superficial wounds and 1 is in critical condition. Her ship is destroyed, along with all advanced medical supplies. They have 1 mobile med pack. We've also lost communication." "That's not an emergency, Winston. That's a disaster. Is there any good news?" Andrew stretched his shirt collar, alternating his gaze between Winston and Bjork. "A parent vessel was hiding behind the target vessel we destroyed. Their weapons were daisy-chained, which explains the increased range." Bjork shuffled his feet under Andrew's focused gaze. "We didn't send a probe to the surface first. I take responsibility." Andrew ignored the apology and leaned over the tactical table. The table, unable to interpret his hand positions, zoomed into the planet's surface until it could go no further, resetting and repeating the process. "So either Lisa's entire team is dead, or the enemy ship is positioned between us to interrupt communications," Andrew said. "I'll see if we can use what's left of our ship's sensors to find their location." Bjork immediately relayed the request to the tech's overcom. "We need more information." Andrew massaged his right eye and closed the other as he concentrated on organizing what he knew. "Can the techs break midgetmen communications?" "No, that'd take too long," he thought. "Pulse their data stream, disrupt their communications to buy some time? But to what effect?" Lisa's voice in his ear startled him, and he jumped, alarming both Winston and Bjork. "Make another 800-yard sweep. We must find it," Lisa was saying to someone. "Can you hear me, Captain?" Andrew steadied his voice, though he wanted to shout for joy. He slapped Winston on the back, mouthing, "Good job." "It's good to hear your voice, sir. We've got problems. We're planet-side and can't find the emergency cargo our pilot sacrificed himself to drop." "We're on it. What's your situation?" Andrew waved for Bjork to begin searching, but Bjork only shrugged and pointed to his ear, showing he couldn't hear. Andrew muted his comm and repeated, "They're looking for an emergency cargo dropped from the ship before it was destroyed. Search our logs for the location." "MDUs. One of the midgetmen's automated impact waves ripped through Jameson's nude and tore up his leg, but we've got him dosed, foamed, and sealed. If we can find the drop, we have the perfect angle on the enemy's vessel's access hatch. The wave battery will burn all the way through to their command deck." Andrew linked Bjork and Winston into the conversation through his comm. "Don't take out the vessel yet. That's your last resort." "Confirm that order. Do not take it out?" "Correct. They think you're dead right now. Are you injured?" "Negative. Just rattled." "I understand." Andrew was relieved to hear honesty. "Take a deep breath, Captain. You're alive, hidden, and you hold their ship hostage. You're in a strong position." Lisa laughed. "When you say it like that." Andrew looked through Lisa's view transmitter at the dense greenery, and then to the pirate vessel stationed hundreds of feet above the planet's surface. "You're right. The access hatch is wide open receiving cargo. That ship isn't moving." He placed Lisa's position onto the topographical map of D-Hay and leaned over the tactical table. Making a gripping motion with his left hand, the holographic image clamped to his hand and followed him away from the table. Practiced movements with his right hand moved him rapidly through the hills and valleys of the planet's surface. Andrew knew the geography well, having memorized the locale surrounding the midgetmen base during the previous 2 days of research, but the motions and the scanning of the map helped him think. Bjork interrupted his pacing by placing a beacon in a dry creek bed on the map. "The cargo is a wave battery exactly 786 meters east-northeast.
"How is the base security?" Andrew asked Lisa after she finished giving orders for 2 men to retrieve the weapon. "Light. We saw 2 guards outside, and another 6 inside. They rely heavily on automated impact waves to protect them from ground threats, but we're already inside that quarter-mile perimeter. Do you know anything about these bioengineered super-sized sweat-sucking bugs? They descended like a cloud when Jameson's blood was exposed, and now they won't leave. We're having a difficult time keeping the wound clean." Lisa pulled her hair into a tight bun and checked her weapons. "Also, I suspect our heavy nude armor is shielding us from their ship scanners, but I'm not completely sure. Worry about the bugs later. Take 2 men and head for the base. Leave the others to set up the wave battery. Once close, look for any sort of metallic structure to remove your nude. When you show up on the ship's sensors, they should assume you are coming out of the building. Present yourself in civilian dress to the entrance guards and request to see Captain Hemtren. When the doors open, drop a knee and let your men take out the guards outside and in. This plan is all based on the door being opened for me. What if they don't?" Lisa picked her best shooters and motioned them to follow. "These pirates may not be the worst, but when you're on the fringe of society, as a pirate is, one loses the moral restraint that society enforces. Even if the captain is upstanding concerning a beautiful woman, his minions will open the door for you." "I'm going to take that as a compliment," Lisa said as she ran through the dense brush and rocks. "Have your man Yulov take point. He's oogling your butt. And careful how fast you run. Your helmet only recycles a portion of your oxygen." "Should I walk, or is that too strenuous?" she inquired, followed with a more contrite, "Yes, sir." After several minutes of dogged mountain hiking, the gray building appeared through the heavy foliage. It was constructed of fibercrete, the material most used in oxygen-deficient environments. Stronger and lighter, it was much more expensive than concrete, that drawback being offset by its nearly instant set time, which was good since an artificial environment was required for the curing process. A light sheen over the exterior of the building betrayed a protective nude coating, similar to the armor on a starship or the more flexible version worn by Lisa and her men. The building disappeared into the mountainside, hiding what was sure to be an extensive stronghold. "Expensive protection. Someone places a high priority on defense against orbital bombardment," Andrew said. "When I return, don't be staring at my butt," Lisa snapped as she left the 2 behind a vacant guard booth. She ran to a long-haul transport and scaled the 6-rung ladder into the cab. Her fingers fumbled to remove the outer clothing as she struggled to keep the helmet locked in position. Andrew disconnected from her VT while she peeled off the ultra-thin protective layer which covered her entire body. "Thank you," she breathed when the transmitter light blinked off. "All right," she said a few seconds later. "Though I think I can put on a pretty good show." "Wait, lose your helmet. It's clearly military. Reach 2 fingers under your chin. You should feel a small tube. Pinch it, push up, and bite down on the hose. Then find 2 thumb pins on the right side along the chin and push. The helmet will disengage, but the breathing unit will remain attached to the neck mount." Andrew connected again and saw she'd been successful. He watched with racing heart as she approached the 2 guards. She'd ripped off the arms and legs of her uniform, seductively revealing her toned body. "Break their hearts," he muttered. Lisa chortled. The guards flanking the entrance had the appearance of one-eyed bugs with their armored helmets. They were startled when Lisa emerged from the shadows, and their weapons blinked to life. When she didn't slow or appear fazed by the display, their stances slowly relaxed. The one on the left waved her closer to perform an optic scan to confirm identity. Lisa hesitated. She obviously couldn't do the scan, but the guard was still beckoning, while the second guard moved towards the door controls. If only she could buy some time. She tripped. The guard was at the door controls. Grabbing her ankle, she saw the doors opening. The other guard approached, and he looked annoyed. No, she needed to calm down. That was her imagination. The guard's bug-eyed mask couldn't look annoyed. He was reaching for something. Jumping to her feet, Lisa ripped the concealed knife from her rear pouch and, launching herself at the guard, buried the blade into the man's brain through the soft part of the armor just behind the ear. 4 additional guards were visible through the double doors, seated around a table playing something. Why weren't her men shooting? The second guard glanced in her direction. She rolled with the body and used it as a shield. Shots fired rapidly, and the pirates began to drop, but not before the door started to close. Lisa jumped to her feet and raced for the door, diving to place a glue bug in the track. When the door hit the blockage, it ground noisily but couldn't overcome the exceedingly sturdy adhesive. "Messy," Andrew said. "Drag those bodies inside before the ship's sensors detect them lifeless." Lisa grabbed a booted foot of each corpse and heaved. They were inside by the time her 2 shooters arrived. One of them held the nude and HMDU she'd left behind. She accepted the weapon and the armor and stepped into a small closet. Andrew again left her VT while she slipped back into her protective armor and snapped the weapon above her ear, but he continued to talk. Simple now. Separate, search, and slaughter. Save the captain. He checked behind Lisa after hearing a pop. "And tell Mr. Idiot to remove his vacuum poppers. A HMDU can't miss a head at this range, so he doesn't need the extra firepower, but we do need the silence." The halls were naked fibercrete except for occasional cooling repeaters, which hung exposed. Andrew looked ahead just as another enemy dropped to the ground, seizing from a hit in the neck. Lisa paused a full 2 seconds before shooting him again. Andrew noted that Lisa was methodical. She knew a hit in the neck was irrecoverable and chose the best route. She also didn't explain the action to her commanding officer, who she knew was watching. "Stay sharp. People die when they think it's safe," Andrew said. A foot was barely visible at a fork ahead. Lisa fired. A string of curses erupted as someone ran away with distinctive thumping. "The voice match is positive for the captain," Winston nearly shouted. He gripped the technician's chair. Neither he nor Bjork could view events, but they were listening intently. "He knows you're jamming his comm. He's trying to reach a panic button." Andrew impulsively reached to grab the retreating foot, which showed for a fleeting moment when Lisa peeked around the corner. Lisa didn't answer, but ran full tilt after him. The captain was reaching for a side door when her wave caught his other foot. He collapsed to the floor. "Sedate him, and keep the other 2 searching for others. No surprises are best. Also, have the rest of your unit start heading for the base. Your medic might be able to use their medical facilities." "Aren't I supposed to be in charge of mission details?" "Yes. See how well that's worked out?" His voice hardened. "Do it." She was in no position to question him after the debacle. She didn't answer, and Bjork and Winston remained intently focused on the map. "What would you do now, Lisa?" Andrew asked. "Hand him over to his crew in exchange for the ship?" "Not entirely bad, but not fully thought out either. Which is easier to get, a captain or a ship?" "We would take the ship any day. Search the base for weapons and financial records. A hidden pot of gold would be best." "My VT would be off if I found a pot of gold," Lisa countered. "What type of weapons did the goons have?" "Military-grade HMDUs," she said. "Vacuum poppers? Never mind, doesn't matter. Search their data for masked accounts or some form of anonymous banking. Don't bother sniffing for currency chips. The nude covering this base and their weapons cost too much for physical currency transactions. When you find the data, offer them half their accounts for the ship. When you get the ship, destroy the base." Andrew headed for the door. "You did well, Lisa. See you in a few weeks." He was surprised to find his comm with Lisa, Bjork, and Winston was still open even after the door closed. "Can you all hear me?" "Yes, sir," Lisa answered. Andrew tapped out of the connection and shook his head, surprised it hadn't broken automatically. When he exited the spire, the streets were pitch black and simulated night. Though he'd only been on Lisa's planet for an hour, 4 had passed in Bagwell City. He walked the city belt to his apartment and wearily pushed open the door. While his building's exterior was a curved contemporary style with large windows, the decor inside was a stark contrast in warmth. The apartment was an open design. The kitchen was directly accessible to the dining table, which was adjacent to the living room. Aged wooden bookshelves lined every wall, their spacing only broken by the occasional antique map or parchment, lovingly mounted. Nearly 200 ancient books were packed onto the shelves, along with a handful of parchments. Everything was immaculate, every item in its place. The only separate rooms were the bathroom and bedroom, which offered a dramatic shift. Not a book was in sight. Weapons lined the walls, ancient maces, 2-handed swords, cutlasses, bows, blunderbusses, pistols, assault rifles, and even a first-generation mounted defense unit. The MDU was the head-mounted version, which looked similar to the old rifle scopes, with the addition of a head strap. In one corner, blocking the view of some of the weapons, the piece de resistance stood facing the bed, a 6-foot suit of armor. Andrew removed his uniform and carefully hung it flat against the wall before collapsing into bed. The lights switched off, plunging the entire apartment into darkness.